So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Dynamite Fright Night, and I do want to say that this was definitely a very, very important show, and a lot of things happened, but it was also a 50-50 show for me because I did feel like that there was a lot of progression, and then I also felt like, the matches just didn't stand out to me that much. And I also feel that, we're in this issue of all repeat wrestling, and I want to just like go through this. So it opens with a fatal four way of the tag teams, and then, the winner of that is actually FTR. And I was kind of having some predictions in my head about, like, about this, because it's going to be Bandito versus FTR. So I'm predicting that FTR is going to win, and then you're going to get Adam Copeland and Christian versus FTR in the future. And I think what they're going to try to do is have Adam Copeland and Christian retire as tag team champions, almost like what they did with Sting and Darby Allin. Maybe like Revolution could be in Canada. So I think that they're really going to go down that direction, really, just to kind of give them a heads up. Or they could do something where FTR is about to win, and then Adam Copeland and Christian appear to save Bandito, and then they have one more match at World's End, like they end their feud in 2025. So definitely, I think that for Full Gear, you're going to have Adam Copeland and Christian Cage either challenge FTR when they become the tag team champions, or they don't become tag team champions, and then you're going to have, them have like a blow off match. But I do feel that I wanted Jurassic Express to win because I felt like, they're very hot, they're very over with the company. So it would make sense for them to actually, be featured on the pay per view and really ride that momentum. So I think that I really hope that they do have a match at Full Gear, but I'm not sure what they're going to do with that. But definitely FTR is a good team because because you have to do, yeah, heel versus babyface is always the best dynamic instead of babyface and babyface. And then the next thing is that you had another, like, you had like another match. I think it was like the women's tag team tournament. And I'm just trying to go off of memory, but you had the women's tag team tournament, and what happened in that was you had Queen Aminata and you had Queen Aminata, and you had like that person that's just Jamie Hayter, and then you also had the Sisters of Sin, and Sisters of Sin does sound like a porno, a porno that Vince McMahon would watch. But the Sisters of Sin, when they had Tekla get involved, and I'm okay with this because Jamie Hayter, even though some people say that she doesn't really get that far in AEW, that I'm okay with them losing because Jamie Hayter, in my opinion, she's been the AEW Women's Champion. If people were betting money, Jamie Hayter would be one of the people that people bet on. But that's kind of the direction they need to go in. Like, Mercedes and Athena need to lose, and then also Tony Storm and Mia Shirakawa should lose because you have to really create a new women's tag team division, and you cannot do that by just saying, okay, it's going to be Tony Storm or Athena or a Mercedes because they've been dominating the division. It's almost just like when they had Riho become the first women's champion, and I'm going to do a video about that because the reason why Rio won was because she's friends with Kenny Omega, so it was really a nepotism thing. So you can't kind of just do that thing too, like, okay, we're having a new division, but it's going to be either by politics or either by somebody already established or somebody already rewarded. And then there was a couple of segments, there was a controversial one because like Hook was becoming Hook was in the main event, and I didn't agree with him being the main event, but he's saying that he's going after Samoa Joe, really. And I think the only reason why he was in the main event was because they needed a jobber, so they had Hook in that. And I also saw that Don Callis segment where Don Callis had that homoerotic artwork, and it's going to lead to Takeshita and Okada. Like, that segment's leading to Takeshita and Okada, setting up a feud, really. And I do kind of wonder how good Takeshita and Okada, how good Takeshita's going to be, because Takeshita, they're really trying to push him as a really big single star. But the problem is is that when you hear Will Ospreay speak, he has like a bunch of fire in his voice. But with Takeshita, I really think that, as I said, he really needs to start take classes, maybe on promos or things like that. You have to really see if at his best, how can he kind of be loud and proud and emotional and passionate and fiery like John Cena or other people. Like if he doesn't have that, then you need to have him, make a friend really, and somebody backstage help him. It could be Kenny Omega or whoever really. But you need to give him a manager if he can't do that, because you can't have a champion and then he has like no good mic skills, or he's just like a little all over the place. Like a great example was AJ Styles. Like in TNA wrestling, he wasn't the best mic person, but towards the end of his career, he became a better mic person. Then when he was in WWE, he worked on that a little bit more, really. But you have to make sure it all goes together, really. And I don't think Takeshita has that, but I also hope they don't underlook that. My favorite segment of the night is that they actually, backstage segment was that they actually talked about um, Bandito and what it means for him to wrestle and have his mom there. I think, yeah, his mom or grandmother there, but she came from Mexico and went to San Antonio and saw him. So I really think they can tie something in with that, because obviously you can have like a heel kind of just talk crap to his mom, and then he's like, you know what, you don't make fun of mama really, and there's consequences. I think that with Bandito, he's a really great wrestler. I think with AEW, he's kind of like the AEW version of Rey Mysterio, but I do think you need to kind of give him some conflict. Like honestly, if you really really have to get to the point where somebody's disrespecting his mom, or you have MJF or whoever kind of disrespect his mom really, and you create a feud or you create something, that's going to help Bandito get bigger and better, really. Because I think there's something to him. But just like with Takeshita, he falls in that category of, I can do good matches, but I can't talk on the microphone. And we can't find managers, or we cannot find, promo classes for these people. Like Thunder Rosa can even be his manager, as well, really. Or you can have Brodito be his manager or be his hype man. There's so many things that you can do, really. The other thing that I want to say is that they announced it's going to be Kyle O'Reilly and John Moxley. Kyle O'Reilly and John Moxley, they had another match, and it led to, and they had like another match, and that's when I stopped watching. Because I'm not really interested in like watching them have matches again, like against each other, because they already did this a couple of times, really. So it was on repeat mode. But the only thing that saved the segment was that they announced that it's going to be there's going to be a men and women's blood and guts, the same way that with WWE there's a men and women's Hell in a Cell match. They kind of have both, really, or men and women's Royal Rumble, really. So I'm going to do a video about that, but I do feel happy because last year I got fucked over. I was going to go to Blood and Guts in Nashville, and what happened was that, Delta Airlines had all those issues, really, so my flight was delayed, 16, 17 hours, and, I had front row seats, so now this year I'm going to get two, and I'm actually leaving, a day early to go down to North Carolina, so hopefully that works out, because anything can happen, really. But yeah, I'm happy that there's two of them, but that's going to be a very hard for AEW, because I think you're going to see a bunch of repeats, but they have to do things differently. So I'm going to do another video about that, but definitely, whatever the women do has to be different from what the men do, because they can't do something like put somebody in glass and then put the men in glass, and then you put the women in glass in the second thing, because then people are going to say, oh, this feels a little repetitive. The next thing that I want to say is it opened with Darby Allin and with Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy versus the Death Rise. It was like Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta. But the thing about it is that obviously the Death Riders lose, Wheeler Yuta loses. And I do agree with what Russell Toddy says, because one of the problems with Wheeler Yuta is that if he's part of this faction, he's always involved, he cannot be like the jobber, really. And when they had the Blackpool Combat Club, Wheeler was in that role really. So, it's almost like the Don Callis family. Like if you have Hechicero and a lot of them lose, or Rocky Ramiro, or other people lose all the time, really, why would you want them part of your faction? Would you want to get rid of your weak links? Or would you want to do the full metal jacket thing, proper motivation, because, it does not make sense to have a bunch of losers in a faction. And then they also had, they announced that Penelope Ford cannot compete because she has an injury. Like she cannot compete in the tag team tournament. So it's Megan Bain and Maria Shafir. So I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. I do agree with what I Am Zayn was saying. It probably is better if you have Camille, because imagine a Megan Bain and Camille versus Athena and Mercedes, because Camille was overshadowed by Mercedes. And then also too, Athena is the name of a goddess, and Megan Bain is a goddess. So I think that kind of all that kind of works together in a lot of different ways, really. But they're not doing that, and I think Maria Shafir. A lot of people say that she's not that great of a wrestler, really. So it's gonna be really interesting. And I also didn't like that segment where Maria Shafir showed up, because the problem was that John Moxley kind of was like in the camera, so it kind of goes into one of those things really where it would have been a better segment. It was just Marina, not John Moxley, because the problem is that when you do that, it kind of hams it up a little bit. So that's one of these things where, you have to really watch, where sometimes maybe they need to have the writers watch the show and make some notes by saying, oh, we shouldn't have done that, or that shouldn't have not happened, because you went from something serious and maybe a step up for Maria Shafir, because, shouldn't she have gone after the TBS, ROH women's television, or tag team or whatever? She should have gone after some women's titles, really. I think she should have done that, really. But now she's doing that, and it's a little too late, really. But obviously, you have to make sure that it doesn't feel campy. But you have John Moxley being like, and other things like that. You're kind of hamming it up, and and also as a leader of the Death Riders, he should not be doing that, because you can't have a leader of a faction kind of ham it up a little bit, because you don't want to. You want to take John Moxley seriously, because he's a former champion. He's done a lot with his Death Rider thing, so you don't want to turn him into stupid ass comedy mode type of thing. Really, it's kind of like D-Generation X when Triple H got injured during the time of John Cena, being the year-long champion in the mid-2000s. I remember when Triple H came back, there were always segments with him doing stupid crap. And it kind of got to a point, really, with me where I was like, okay, that's a little too much Triple H, really. Like, yeah, he's funny, and that's part of his character, but you have to dial it back sometimes. And I felt they should have dialed that back with John Moxley. Another thing about this show that was a huge weakness, that's not forgivable to me, is that they didn't announce anything about the women's blood and guts match. If you look up online, I believe they said it's Jamie Hayter and Queen Aminata and the Sisters of Sin. I think they're all in it, but they didn't really announce that on the show. You had to look that up online. And then the other thing too is that they said it's gonna be 4-on-4 for the women, but 5-on-5 for the men, and that's really bad, because it should be 5-on-5 in each group. Really, it shouldn't be okay. Well, it's just like a women's Royal Rumble. You wouldn't do something like have a 30-man men's Royal Rumble, and then you're like, okay, we don't have enough popular women, so we're gonna do a 15-women Royal Rumble. You have to kind of make sure you have 5-on-5, 5-on-5, just so it doesn't feel like, okay, the women are being handicapped. But also like during the main event, I'm trying to think to myself, anything else happened on the show that's significant. The Young Bucks might join the Don Callis family. That doesn't mean anything to me. But the main event was the Fatal 4-Way, the controversial Fatal 4. And I was gonna do a video about this, but it was a little too. But, I was too busy to do it. But Hook should have not been in the main event. I think it should have been Mark Briscoe. But I understand why Hook was in it. Like, they wanted to give Hook a loss. And then also, too, you don't know what Hook is going to do, really. Because you could do Samoa Joe versus Hangman Adam Page. Hook costs him. And then you lead to Samoa Joe versus Eddie Kingston, which would be a really great match. But that could be something. But the other problem is you can lead to Hook versus Samoa Joe, and that's a bad match, because Samoa Joe is this big, massive motherfucker, really. And Hook is a smaller guy, really. So it's almost like you're taking this very charismatic, wrestler, and he's fighting somebody that's a twig. Really, it's almost like if you had Trick Williams, not Trick Williams. Pardon me, but it's almost like if you had Leon Slater in TNA wrestling. If you gave him a match with Will Ospreay, that would be really good. I would like that. But if you gave him a match with Bobby Lashley, that would be a bad one because you wouldn't want Leon Slater beating Bobby Lashley because Bobby Lashley is somebody who's lifted Viscera. Samoa Joe did the Tower Doom spot in TNA wrestling where the Aces and Eights he power bombed like five people at a time really. And you're gonna have him lose the Hook or you're gonna set up him versus Hook. That's a very dangerous mix because people will be like, okay, that's just we know who Hook's daddy is really, so we understand that he may get some he may get some shine really. But the other saving grace of the show is that they announced a lot of really great matches for Collision, but I really hope for Collision, and they did. And there are spoilers online really, but I really hope for Collision. They announced more stuff for AEW, of Full Gear and Women's Blood and Guts. Like I think the Women's Blood and Guts, if they want to do themselves a favor, they should probably announce a lot of shit for both shows on Collision, or even like say, hey, not on Dynamite, but on Collision, we're going to talk about Women's Blood and Guts to say, hey, tune into Collision. This is why the show matters, really, because they have to make both shows matter. Like, one thing I like with WWE is that on both Raw and SmackDown, they said, and even on ECW, they kind of said, hey, there's matches on the show that that we're going to talk about that are going to be on WrestleMania, really. You have to make Collision matter. Because if you don't make it matter, it's going to be kind of like ROH, and eventually it's going to be like Rampage where it gets canceled, really. But I do think that that's a concern of mine. So, but they announced for Collision, Mascara Dorada versus Bandito. Hell yes. And I read online the winners and losers for Collision. But they said that the match between them is going to be awesome. And I have time to watch Collision this weekend. Lucky me. And it's also good for me because I have to work 9 hours because of daylight saving times. Fuck whoever came up with that. But the other part of it is that in addition to that, there's also going to be Okada and Takeshita in a tag team, and they spoiled it. It's them against the Acclaimed, and there's going to be a lot of other stuff on Collision, really. So I really am excited to see what they do for Collision as well, really. But Samoa Joe wins, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it's a story that they're telling, really. But my hope is that they have a stipulation. Like, they can do a Texas death match. They can do a cage match. Or they can do a submission match or something like that. But I would hope that they would do something where you don't have too, like, extremely bloody or hardcore stuff. I don't mind Joe and Adam Page having a bloody match. Or even a Texas death match. And then you do something where you can do Darby Allin, and I've said this many times, you can do Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy versus Moxley and Daniel Garcia, or you can do something like, 3-on-3 with the conglomeration of Darby Allin, just to give people a break from Darby Allin and Moxley doing hardcore stuff. I've talked about an Inferno match between Darby Allin and Moxley, because there's been rumors online that they've wanted to do that. Like, it was supposed to be MJF and Briscoe in an Inferno match. There was rumors of that, but I think they're trying to save it for a different arena, and it could be It could be Moxley Darby in an Inferno match, or what you could do is what I've said: Bryan Danielson and Darby Allin versus maybe like Claudio and John Moxley, like two like really established people that, like, you can kind of do something interesting where they don't have to do a bloody hardcore match, and you save that for Joe and Hangman. That could work out very, very well, really. But overall, like I said before, and I'll say it again, like, I think that I appreciate the progression, but there's some like repeat stuff. There's some predictable directions. Like I've said, that I really think that really they're going to do something where FTR either wins the tag team championships and then Edge and Christian win it from them for a nostalgia trip. And I don't want to see that because Edge and Christian, like they're in their 50s. It feels like a nepotism thing. And if they're retiring, you're going to repeat what you did a few years ago when Sting retired as a tag team champion. So that in a way is kind of like, privileged treatment. The other thing is that I'm a little concerned about who's going to be the women's tag team champion because it cannot be Mercedes and Athena or Tony Storm and Mina, because the problem is if you do that, you're showing that you cannot trust, you cannot trust new people. The other thing that I will say is Samoa Joe and Hangman. Samoa Joe, there's two things about it. If it's a rematch and there's no stipulation, Joe has to win because it looks bad if he loses two times in a row. And then the other thing too is that if Joe should lose, they should have a stipulation just to say, hey, you know what, just to make it different. But also too, they should have a stipulation because you should not do what WWE does. John Cena, Randy Orton, like over 100 times. You have to do something different each time, really. So I would say that it's a show that I really enjoyed, but it's definitely in like all repeat. It's definitely a little repetitive. But I'm excited to go to Blood and Guts, and then I'm also excited to go to Full Gear. And I'm talking with my boss to go to Cincinnati because I'd love to go to the ROH show. And I would also, if that doesn't work out, either way, then my final show of the year is AEW Wrestle Dream. And I also want to say, too, I'm trying to reach my 1,000 subscribers. I got some IRS debt, so hopefully, like, next year I can still do like my traveling to different AEW shows and keep that going, really. But I got to make money, every way that I can, really. I got to make that bread, really. And if I do have some debts, I'm going to just do some leases and other things like that because, I want to keep this AEW channel going. I want to keep reviewing it. I want to keep doing travel videos. I want to keep doing burger reviews and other shit like that. I want to keep this channel running and going, really, So that's all I got to say about it. For a show, as I said, I hate bees, but I would say it's kind of like there's a lot of progression towards pay-per-views and storylines instead of just like it. They did their goal of just of building up to stuff, but not completely. So I would say that this show is like really much of a B minus. If they really talked about Women's Blood and Guts, then I would say B plus, really. But this falls into the B minus range for the show.